we're going to talk about what many now describe as an existential threat, which is the small-scale mining industry in Ghana. I don't want to call it illegal mining because both those who conduct it legally by the law and those who do so illegally are bringing about the same catastrophic consequences to our environment and to people's health. And so I describe it as anarchic gold mining. So today we are here to interrogate the question as to whether the state is helpless in getting a hold on this contemptible menace. I have 4 distinguished panelists to join me. First is Manesseh Awuni, who is a household name in Ghana. He is a 2011 Ghana Journalist of the Year. Recently was a Nieman Foundation Journalist Fellow at Harvard University. He has just written a book titled The President Ghana Never Got. It's a 400-page book that almost describes an entire country as though it was a crime scene. So if you haven't had your copy, go get one, and you won't regret it. I also have Dr. Isaac Odoom. He's an assistant professor of political science at Carleton University. His research is on China's relations with the South, specifically African countries. I think there's a China dimension to this conversation, and so he is on here to give us that aspect of the problem. And then Dr. Francis Xavier Dery Tuokuu. He's an environmentalist. He has done a lot of research on small-scale mining in Ghana, but he's currently an environmental policy and compliance manager or advisor with an NGO based in Washington, D.C. So Francis, you're welcome. And then last but not the least, my friend Owureku Kusi Ampofo, who is a policy analyst based in Canada. He's from Konongo, and they are witnessing some of the disastrous consequences of illegal mining or small-scale mining. So gentlemen, you are welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I'm going to begin with a video that describes what is currently going on in Ghana as far as this small-scale mining problem is concerned. Maybe there are people joining us today who are not too familiar with this problem. And so it will give them a general background and it will lead us into the conversation. This is a documentary or a news coverage by Al Jazeera, which I would play, and then it will lead us into the discussion. All right, so just give me a minute.
This is what Africa's largest gold producer looks like from above. As gold productions boomed in Ghana, illegal mines have sprung up along most of its rivers. Earth is mixed in the water, making it untreatable. Miners use mercury to separate the gold. Once mercury is in the water, it's nearly impossible to remove it. Downstream, Ajuwa depends on river water for cooking, drinking, and washing, as do most of the people living in the countryside.
Our children often fall sick. Many people are dying these days, and we strongly believe it's the water. The river was our source of clean drinking water until the mining started here. What can we do? The police come and chase the miners away, but they always come back.
Dr. Elliot Tanor says mercury from the mines is killing people. He says the number of patients coming to this hospital in Ashanti region with kidney disease has tripled in the last 10 years, and about a third of them can't afford dialysis, so they die.
This mercury is something that we know that definitely affects the brain, it affects the liver, and it affects the kidney. So we are worried because we tend to see a lot of patients coming from mining areas with all forms of kidney disease. So we know definitely that there is some link.
Ghana's main water provider says the pollution's become so bad it's having to switch off treatment plants because they can't make the water clean. There are abundant natural water resources here, but they're becoming unusable.
If all these things are to continue the way it is, in addition to climate change, we may have most of the rivers in our country may go extinct, and then we may have to be importing water into the system.
Researchers say the government urgently needs to enforce environmental laws to stop illegal mining and clean up the rivers. The health of tens of millions of Ghanaians may depend on it. Malcolm Webb, Al Jazeera.
All right. Okay, so in 2015, the president said he was willing to put his presidency on the line to address the issue of illegal gold mining. Again, there's a video here of him talking about it that I would like to play, and then again, it will set it up for us to have a discussion. No, but okay, but anyway, before I go into that, Manesseh, I want to come to you first with a quote that you are in your book with respect to the government addressing this issue. You interviewed a former member of the administration, who I guess would be the Minister for Environment and Science. And then he says, just look at this, tumbling through one document after the other. All these are permits Sir John gave to people to mine in the forest reserves. He said, sounding upset. The question here is, has the state become helpless in addressing this issue of Galamsey, based on your experience?
Thank you, Mark. I must say that this person is actually not a former minister. He's still in office, a cabinet minister in this administration. And when the person told me this, I asked, so why did you not hold Sir John accountable? Because they discovered this when Sir John was still alive, when COVID hadn't killed him. And so the response was, it was almost too late. And I think also it was getting an election and they had a lot of considerations. So I don't think the state is helpless. We decided to look on and allow the problem get worse every passing day. And when the NDs was in office, we saw the problem growing. They moved in to tackle it at a point. For whatever reason, they stopped. Then the MPP came in 2017, and then there was a media coalition against Galamsey. I think I've been a journalist for a while, but this was the first time I saw media houses and journalists with the backing of some civil society members coming together to form a coalition against a single issue. It drew the attention of the, how do you call it, the government of the day. And then the president was compelled to make that statement that he was putting his presidency on the line. In 2017, when that statement was made, the problem was not as bad as it is today. And I dare say that it won't be today won't be as bad as it will be in 2025 or 2026 if we fail to tackle it. Are we saying that if we had been attacked by a foreign army, we're going to just fold our arms and say that we are not going to do anything? We are not overwhelmed. The only reason we feel overwhelmed is that those that are supposed to fight it are the beneficiaries. It is like having gamekeepers who have turned poachers. They will give you every reason why poaching cannot be resolved because they themselves are the poachers. I dare say that there are very powerful chiefs in this country, Ghana, whose jurisdictions headquarter some of these illegal mining activities. And we know the power chiefs in this country wield. I asked the question recently, why is it that chiefs have all the power to do everything, including one chief of Drobonso boasting publicly that Nana Kwame Bediako, popularly known as Cheddar, came to his town to campaign, and then he made them sack him because he didn't first come to pay homage to his palace. If these chiefs get up and say, look, we are not going to tolerate illegal mining in our jurisdictions, I bet you this is going to end. If the politicians ever get serious, and I'm talking about seriousness, not in the lip service that we pay, and they want a solution to this, it is going to stop. Currently, what we have is people talking about a problem, and some even wanting to score political points. But when it comes to dealing with it, there isn't that seriousness. And when I spoke to this minister of state, who is a cabinet minister, the impression I got was that they admit in private how members of the governing party and even members of government have contributed to this problem. Publicly, when there is a discourse, they sing from a different hymn book. And sometimes they do that saying that, well, if they admit publicly or if they go certain ways, their opponents would want to take advantage of it. And don't you see how they campaigned using Galamsey in 2020 and all of that? So what they are looking at is the next election. That is of concern to them in everything they are doing. And it's part of the reason we are here. I believe it is part of the reason the NDC relaxed at the time. And it's part of the reason the MPP has not been able to resolve it and rather escalated it. And sometimes when we talk about this issue, there are the politicians who say that, look, why do you bring NDC into it? I think it will not be, we won't have a fair discussion if we don't make this a national problem and decide to make it a problem of the MPP. At every point in time, there is a precedent. And as we speak, there is only one leader who is mandated by the Constitution to fight this problem. We know the responsibility is on Akufo-Addo. But if we want to have a very honest discussion about this, we have to look at how it started, where it is going, and someone who has just checked out, a president we never had. I don't think we can trust him that much now. It is very likely that in a month or two's time, we are going to have a new leader. So let us bring everybody into this conversation, including the traditional leaders.
Okay.
Who sometimes keep the land.
Okay. So, but Manesseh, he is not
Yes.
seeking re-election. So, wouldn't you think that he is the best person at this moment to address this problem?
I have lost hope and trust in Akufo-Addo. I believe he has checked out of our republic. It's like a pilot who got a parachute and then left the plane. And so whatever turbulence that is happening, he doesn't appear to care. Before he even sought re-election, some of his actions pointed to some level of impunity, and he acted in most ways, sometimes like not as a democratic leader, but like some of these traditional rulers who think that their words are final. And we know what happened in other sectors. For instance, in the sector of corruption, the area of corruption, the most efficient auditor general in this country, Akufo-Addo, didn't like him. He had to sack him. And accomplice, and I'm saying accomplice because in my book, I named the judiciary of Ghana as an accomplice to the mess we have seen, held on such a time that the ruling had no effect. And so this is someone who, even when he didn't when he wanted re-election, he didn't think that he had to do what was right. And now that he's leaving, sometimes I have the impression that he doesn't even care whether or not Baumia or whoever contests on the ticket of the MPP wins. Because in 2008, we know what President Kufuor did in his second term. He didn't behave as though he didn't care. So it is not only about whether or not he's contesting again, or he is in a position to do something good and then leave a legacy. I believe he has checked out, and I don't expect much from him. I don't want to say anything because he's still our leader or our president, because I don't see him much of a leader. He's a president. He has the constitution backing him. And sometimes they tell you that on the last day of office, they are still presidents and then they have the power to do certain things. The question is, will this president that we have, that many people are so disappointed in, be willing to work, or he's going to lean on his lame duck status and then just sit down as he has done and allow this menace to continue? My conversations with members of the governing party long before this organized labor brouhaha happened was that because of election 2024, they would not do anything meaningful against Galamsey. So whatever we are seeing is just something to create the impression that they are responding to the pressure from organized labor. But in terms of commitment, a commitment to really tackle the problem, they are not. Because if you speak to people who know how this activity happens, they tell you that it is from Jubilee House to the districts. Because those dirty guys we see in the trenches, they don't have the money to buy excavators and transport them into those forests.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, but in case others have forgotten how Akufo-Addo sounded with respect to getting a hang on this issue, I would like to play a video of him in 2017, I think, prior to the 2020 election, where he described the menace of Galamsey and the fact that we needed to take urgent measures to deal with it. So I'll go to his video right now, and then
how important the issue that has brought all of us here together is for the future of our country. We've gone through some difficult times in Ghana in the last few years and longer, and it has meant that a lot of people have had to find a way to keep body and soul together. So it's got people involved in all kinds of activities. And I can understand it, that the first duty of any man, any woman is to provide for their family. And you do it with the best means you can. But we have also to recognize that difficult as things have been and the looking for employment and stuff, there are things that we just cannot allow to happen. And one of them is the heritage, the inheritance that our fathers and our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers bequeathed to us, especially the space, the Ghanaian space, which we all occupy. We have a duty to preserve it for those who are coming after us. And if our river bodies are drying up, our landscape is being desecrated, we here, leaders of our society, leaders of our nation, political leaders, traditional rulers, religious leaders, we have a responsibility to say no. This, we cannot allow it to go on for our own common survival and the survival of those who are to come. We can't, if we allow it, we are jeopardizing our own future. The cabinet, when we decided the time had come for us to put the weight of government behind the decision to try and stop illegal mining in Galamsey, we composed a cabinet of very responsible Ghanaians, headed by a very renowned, eminent figure in our country, Professor Kwabena Frimpong-Boateng. And they are the ones who then designed a program for us of what we needed to do to try and arrest the menace and preserve our heritage. In the course of it, Professor Frimpong-Boateng goes on to a meeting, a conference in Abidjan, and there the Ivorian leaders tell him, you people are not helping us. This illegal mining that is taking place in Ghana is beginning to affect us, our water bodies and our space in Côte d'Ivoire. Rivers, waters, even forests, they don't know national boundaries. They run across nations. And there he was, very embarrassed, very apologetic that the activities of Ghanaians is jeopardizing the space of a fellow and neighbor country in our region. That's how serious the matter is. Rivers that have been with us for centuries are drying up. Forest areas, which we should preserve for the sanctity of our life and our environment, being devastated by this phenomenon of Galamsey. And all kinds of people from all aspects of our national life are involved in this exercise. Security personnel, political leaders, businessmen, and dare say it, Nananum. Some are all involved in this. So we sat down, we said to ourselves, we have a responsibility. When you take the oath that you are sworn to protect the integrity of the nation, Ghana. You sworn to uphold its constitution. You swear to uphold its sovereignty. That is that the care of the nation, what's in it? Its people, its resources, its nature have been put in your care. Temporarily. As a trustee, like Nananum are trustees of the lands on which they occupy for their people. So you are too, at the national level, a trustee of the lands and the resources of our nation. So you ask yourself, how best can you discharge this trust? You sit back and say, well, all these young men don't have anything to do, so let it go on. At least it's better that they're earning something than they should be at home and perhaps causing other kinds of problems. When you know that the activities that they're involved in are jeopardizing the very survival of our nation, I took the decision that that would be a betrayal of the trust that the Ghanaian people put in me on the 7th of January this year. And as a result, we established this committee within the government to design a policy for us, not just to stop it, to reclaim the land, to let our rivers work again, but also to see how we can figure a way for all these able-bodied young men who are involved in this activity to find an alternative livelihood. So it's a package. It's a package that we have designed to try and bring this menace to a conclusion.
All right. Okay. So Francis, the president spoke like an environmentalist. He recognizes the problem, every aspect of it. But he also mentions the issue of jobs. Whenever we bring up this Galamsey issue, people talk about the potential loss of jobs and how much foreign exchange Ghana is getting from the small-scale mining industry. Now, I mean, you and I have had these conversations where the last time you professed more or less a textbook approach to addressing this problem, which I disagreed. But what is done in other parts of the world, the manner in which we conduct small-scale mining in Ghana, is there any example anywhere in the world where you think there can be a balance between keeping people employed in the industry and also maintaining the integrity of our environment?
Thank you very much. So to start with, over 40 million people are engaged in artisanal small-scale mining across the world, particularly in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. In Ghana, a little over 1 million people are engaged in the sector. Out of this number, 85% are operating illegally, and those are the Galamsey miners. The sector, like you rightly pointed out, contributes significantly to economic development, despite the challenges. So, for instance, 1/3 of Ghana's gold comes from the small-scale mining sector. And I've always maintained that the sector is both a complement and a supplement to other economic activities in many rural communities, particularly mining communities. And so there are countries that we can use as model examples to guide us. So, for instance, I'll mention just a few countries, and I'll give examples to demonstrate why I think those examples can help us. The Philippines, Colombia, Tanzania, and even our neighbors, Burkina Faso. These are countries that have formalized artisanal small-scale mining. Have formalized artisanal small-scale mining. By formalization, it means the right to mineral rights, the right to land, the right to mine. And let me use Colombia as an example. Colombia, what they've done is they have what is called the coexistence model. The coexistence model is that the government has allocated part of the concessions that are owned by large-scale mining companies. So in Ghana, we have large-scale mining companies like Anglo Gold, Ashanti, Goldfields, Golden Star Resources, etc. So in Colombia, part of the concessions that are owned by large-scale mining companies are given to artisanal small-scale miners to mine. That way, they are easily they are able to control them. They are able to monitor their activities. There are also systems in place to ensure that the environment is not polluted, the land is not degraded. So that is one example, coexistence model, where concessions of large-scale mining companies are given to small-scale miners. And also, when they produce the mineral, let's say the gold, the large-scale mining companies buy the gold directly from the small-scale miners. So that is one way. Another model they use is what is called fair mined certified gold, where it kind of like an environmental protocol where miners are supposed to mine responsibly without destroying the environment. They operate under this. They operate a mercury-free system where miners are not supposed to use mercury to separate the gold from the ore. In Ghana, all the artisanal small-scale miners use mercury, and mercury is what pollutes our river bodies. Mercury is what destroys our soils, destroy our lands, pollute the air, destroy the environment, etc. And so they operate a mercury-free system, and that is what also happens in countries like Tanzania, Burkina Faso. They operate a mercury-free system, and they have a robust system in place to ensure that miners don't destroy the environment. Another is that miners are not allowed to mine around river bodies. Miners are not also allowed to mine in forest reserves, thereby protecting and conserving our ecosystems. So that's what happens in other countries. In Ghana, prior to 2022, mining was not supposed to be done around river bodies and also in forest reserves. But this government introduced a law, amended the law, the Minerals and Mining Act of 2006, as amended in 2010, 2015, and also 2019 and 2022. So the government amended the law to allow for some level of mining to be done in forest reserves. And that is why we have people now mining in many forest areas. So those are some of the examples I can give for now. Another is that in Ghana, our system, the Minerals Commission is supposed to regulate mining activities. So if you want to operate a small-scale mining business, you have to register with the Minerals Commission and then mine. But there's no decentralization. So if you are in one part of the country and you want to register your business, you have to go to Accra. And so most people think that doing so is cumbersome, so they just operate without registering their operations. So the registration process is very cumbersome. So that is one of the reasons why most miners don't register at all. They just mine anywhere.
Okay. But Francis, yes. you seem to be seeking to make a distinction between the illegal mining and those with permits. But from what we have seen in the case of Ghana, it appears those with permits are the ones even causing the most devastation. I mean, and I'm quoting from Manesseh's book, that between 2018 and 2020, Sir John, who was the chief executive officer of the Forestry Commission, issued out over 100 permits for prospecting in forest reserves.
Yes.
Right. I think Manesseh corrects the person he was interviewing that, in fact, these were permits but not licenses to mine. But the question is, why are you prospecting for gold in an area that is out of bounds in terms of mining? So again, is our problem really the illegality of this situation, or what is it? I mean, because it doesn't seem that is really the problem.
Yeah, so I agree with Manesseh's submission. But just to add that it's not just about the legal issues. So the problem really is not the lack of policies, but the inability or lack of capacity to implement the existing policies. And government largely is to be blamed for that. So we have the laws, we have policies, we have guidelines, but these are not implemented effectively. So that is a major challenge, and you have to blame government for that. Another is that like I said, the government has not equipped the Minerals Commission to be able to undertake their mandate really well. The Minerals Commission the Environmental Protection Agency, the Forest Services Commission, the Water Resources Commission, etc. These bodies are supposed to work together. They're supposed to collaborate, share ideas, work together to address the issue. But what we have seen is that these agencies are rather engaged in agency competition and infighting. And so then, the Minerals Commission will tell you that they are responsible for mining activities in the country. The EPA will tell you they also have, they are also responsible, especially when it has to do with resources, when it has to do with resource allocation. So because of that, we've not been able to fight the issue well. So it's about management. Management is about implementing the laws. It's about ensuring that the policies that we have developed to protect the environment and the people are effectively implemented. That hasn't been done. So that is the major problem. It's not about having the law, but if you have the law and you don't implement it, then there's no point having the law.
Okay. All right. So I'll bring in Ike here. As I mentioned earlier on, there's a China dimension to this. Recently, there was a certain journalist that took it upon himself to go to a Galamsey site and arrested some Chinese. And apparently now, China is producing cocoa, and they are advertising that cocoa in the market, the global market, as cyanide-free, mercury-free cocaine. I mean, and that's a big slap in our face, given that we are distracting our cocoa farms to dig for gold, and there's heavy Chinese involvement. I mean, you and I have had this conversation about how China tends to do its foreign policy, especially during COVID-19. There was a video circulating about the harassments of some Africans in China, while they were alleged to be the ones spreading the virus. And then the Chinese foreign minister, I think, was confronted about it. The video was showed to him, and he said he's now just seeing it. So there's always a tendency to either distance themselves or deny knowing what is actually going on. Again, I'm bringing in Manesseh's book here because he cites a situation where the senior minister is in the United States in a town hall speaking to Ghanaians in America. And they question him about Chinese involvement. And he says they cannot do anything about it because the government depends on China for loans. And at the time, they were working on the Sino Hydro project. Is this generally the way China does its foreign policy, or this is only the approach they adapt with African countries? And do you think they have a responsibility here?
Yeah, so thank you, Mark, for bringing us together. There's a lot in here, and I'm going to try and unpack them so that those who may not be on the same page can be on the same page. So, number one, we have to understand that the laws of Ghana, the laws that pertain to mining. So Francis was talking about it, how it's been amended over the years, right? So the Minerals and Mining Act, what we know is that, small-scale mining, the law basically forbids non-Ghanaians to engage in small-scale mining, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's number one. But we know, like from the video that you were referring to, and we know historically that foreigners or non-Ghanaians have been engaging small-scale mining in Ghana. So that is contrary to, and this includes Chinese, right? So so that's something this is something that I've been paying attention to for the last more than 12 years, right? I've been studying China and Chinese in Ghana. So before I answer the question of whether China as a state has a responsibility over its citizens and their engagement in mining, I want to clarify that, number one, even though the laws of Ghana prevent non-Ghanaians from engaging in small-scale mining, what we know is that a lot of Chinese are engaged in small-scale mining. But the question of whether these Chinese are illegal is very ambiguous, because some of them they may not own some of the concessions. Most of them don't own concessions, but what they do is that because they work with Ghanaian partners, they're able to establish control, and of course the Ghanaians actually partner with them to work, because there's a loophole in the law that makes it possible for non-Ghanaians to provide technical and financial assistance in the field of small-scale mining. So that's one loophole that the Chinese and other non-Ghanaians have taken advantage of. So they come as if they are kind of providing mining services, and then of course they end up owning concessions, even though on paper it is not a Chinese name on there. It's a Ghanaian name, but that Ghanaian is sponsored by Chinese actors, right? So that's one dimension. The other dimension I also wanted to highlight is that a lot of these Chinese actors across Ghana in illegal mining may not even be known by the Chinese embassy or Chinese authorities in Ghana. So that's one dimension of it, right? Because a lot of people make the argument that the Chinese have just shipped Chinese workers into Ghana, and of course they are engaging in illegal mining. So I need to complicate that a little bit. But there's a bigger picture here. Most people know about China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is basically China's idea of connecting the world. But of course, it's largely driven by its foreign policy objectives, right? As a rising power, it has a lot of influence, especially in the global south, in Africa and elsewhere. But before the Belt and Road Initiative, there's this policy that China has, which is called the Go Out policy, or the Going Global strategy. And basically what this is about is that it is China's policy to encourage enterprises and Chinese actors to invest overseas, to go abroad. If you know the history of China, they were very isolated in the 90s to some extent. And so these by 2000, this go out policy became very formal. So a lot of Chinese businesses and individuals were encouraged to go abroad, right? So a lot of them, of course, went out, and we have those, of course, in Africa and in Ghana. But this is not to say that it was only the 2000 that they started coming, but we're seeing them in droves, right? In that context. Now, the other thing that some people do not also know is that when it comes to China as a state, its actions around the world, especially in the global south, is guided by certain principles. And one of the key principles is this idea of non-interference in domestic affairs of the countries that they engage in. And non-interference basically means that China is indifferent towards domestic issues. Okay. Now, this is challenging for some people because what it means is that whatever the domestic issues that the country that they engage in is going on, whatever the issues that they are encountering, they are indifferent to it. And this is because China does not want other countries to also interfere in their domestic affairs. So they tend not to interfere in domestic affairs of other countries, right? So I'm saying that to say that when Chinese actors, including those who engage in illegal mining, okay, the default position of the Chinese government is to say that this is a domestic issue that the country in question has to deal with, right? Now, this is a problem because on the one hand, it affects the image and reputation of China globally. And then on the other hand, of course, it's a big problem for Ghana because Ghana may be expecting China to do something about its nationals, right? So, but you see, if you don't understand some of these, like, foreign policy principles, you may be thinking that why is China not whipping its people in line, right? But my research shows that a lot of these thousands of Chinese people that are in Ghana who are engaged in small-scale mining, like I said, are not known to the Chinese embassy or the Chinese authorities.
Okay, so Ike, are you suggesting that if the Ghanaian government were to take action against these Chinese migrants,
yeah,
there won't be any repercussion? Because that's not the picture that was painted by the senior minister. So, I mean, they have this no interference policy, but it didn't sound as if the government were to take action, perhaps by deporting all these Chinese back for engaging in illegality, there's not going to be consequences from the Chinese government.
There's definitely going to be, and we have seen this. So, like I said, if you are people who pay attention know that just in 2012, let's go back. I actually go all the way back to 2012 when Atamos was president, right? this is where we had some of the biggest flare up in terms of specific Chinese engagement in the illegal mining or small scale mining. When Mahama took over, right? When President Mahama took over in 2013, President Mahama set up a task force, right? And within 2013 and 2014, Ghana deported over 40,000 Chinese back to China. Okay, so we know that for a fact, right? And we also know that there were also instances where Chinese nationals were actually shot and killed. At least one incident of a Chinese national that was shot and killed because of a confrontation between Chinese miners and the local communities. Now, there was a fallout, diplomatic fallout. So the Chinese sent a delegation and then they had conversations about it because there was a lot of detention. Some of them were detained before they were shipped back and all of that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it is not that there won't be consequences. The consequences actually go beyond that. But let me place this in context. There is a very big gap between the position that Ghanaian political elite take in terms of their engagement with China versus the ordinary Ghanaian. And I need to explain that. Number one, what I mean by that is that most Ghanaian political elite have a cozy relationship with China because of course, the political gains they get from China, because of the funding. I mean, we can talk about from Bui Dam to Atuabu gas project to the bauxite deal and all of that. So there is a general positive sort of relationship between Ghanaian policymakers and China. But there is a much more acrimonious relationship between a lot of people, ordinary Ghanaians, in terms of the perception that they have about China. So there's that gap, right? Even within the ordinary Ghanaians, there's also this sort of difference. Those who partner with the Chinese in small-scale mining have a very positive view about Chinese. And those who are at the receiving end, of course, who are suffering from or who water bodies are destroyed, are also very skeptical of the Chinese. So I guess all these things come to play. What is happening is that because of China's overall policy of non-interference in domestic affairs, okay, what happens is that China isn't going to call out Ghanaian officials for either they wouldn't readily call out Ghanaian officials for maltreating Chinese nationals. They may do that we have seen that happen before, but they normally wouldn't do that because they don't want you to do the same thing against them when there's something happening in China. But a bigger point for me is that because China isn't the one country that is going to be very whip its citizens in line, okay, what happens is that they are hoping that the Ghanaian authorities will do that. But the problem is that we know that the Ghanaian elite are complicit in these activities of small-scale mining. So we have a bigger challenge, which is we cannot expect China to do the work for us when we are supposed to do it ourselves.
No, but I mean, I just asked you if, for instance, there are repercussions from maybe in terms of policy from the Chinese government, right? And you answered in the affirmative and then you make it seem as if it's because of the relationship of individual politicians with China that they are unable to crack the whip. But again, back to what the senior minister said, the impression was that if the Ghanaian government cracks the whip, there are going to be real policy implications, right? But it looks like you've danced around that question without really.
Okay, so let me respond to that more directly. So two things. Number one, you see, I sometimes feel like the typical Ghanaian policymaker needs to have a more nuanced understanding of how China operates. So this point that you are making is based on the fear that, for example, if we crack the whip on Chinese miners who are doing illegal stuff in Ghana or China, then we are likely to lose funding from China.
So, but you think it's not real? Like,
well,
it's not based on...
So there is reason to believe that, right? There's reason to believe that. But you see, how China funds how China finances development in Ghana, okay, it's the system involved in that. It's a little bit more complicated than the fact that if you do this, then B will happen. If you do A, B will happen. I don't think it's a straightforward thing that when China Ghana decides to say to deport 40,000 deport or punish Chinese nationals that engage in illegality, then automatically all funding is going to cease. I think that's a very simple way of looking at it. Of course, we know that I mean, most people know about the Aisha Huan situation, right? Which is part of what happened, because the senior minister said that we couldn't afford to do this. It was going to have serious consequences for us. So we had to just deport her. And then, of course, we know that she came back in, right? But what I'm saying is that if really we understand how China operate, we should be able to crack the whip when necessary, and still, because the Chinese and still being able to get what we want from the Chinese. I always tell my student that if you look at how the China engages with African countries, in Ghana included, the Chinese need us in some cases much more than we need them.
Okay.
So it's not just a matter of you crack the whip on Chinese and then you're gonna stop funding you. They are funding you for a purpose. It's not like they are funding you because like it's in your interest for them to fund. They are funding your project, or they are engaged in the economy because of what they can get from it.
Okay,
so it's not
so
that straightforward.
it's largely a sort of a poor understanding of the way the Chinese operate in terms of foreign.
And Mark, let me just say this. Let me just say this one thing, and then maybe we can go to other topic. But see, there is a general knowledge gap on China, not just in Ghana but across Africa, about Chinese culture, about Chinese principles and how they function, right, and how they engage, the rest of the world.
Okay,
and that is a big problem.
Okay, you sound like you're interviewing for a job now. So.
No, Mark, just to add to what Isaac said, that is very true. I like the last point he mentioned. That is very true. There's a knowledge gap. Do we have experts in Ghana on China's policy? Do we have people at the ministries? So, for instance, Ministry of the Environment, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who have studied, the Chinese policy, the Chinese foreign policy, and how to deal with China? Do we have them? No, we don't. So there's a huge gap, and I agree with you. Canada, for instance, Canada has a policy on how their businesses should behave in foreign lands. And so, if their businesses misbehave in, let's say, Ghana, there's a policy on how the Canadian government will deal with them. So, I mean, just to add to the discussion.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. So let me go to Owureku here. Owureku, let's look at the governance aspect of this, and going back to the topic of today's discussion, right? The Leviathan. We have literally given our sovereignty to the Leviathan, and Nanado in his speech recognized that perfectly, that when he took the oath of office, he took that oath to safeguard Ghana's future. But from the conversation so far, especially beginning with Manesseh's take on this issue, right? The fact that there are government officials involved, there are institutions of the state that have a hand in this. Is the monster in this regard the Leviathan itself? And how are we going to navigate this whole situation? And also, you come from an area that has seen devastation in terms of this. So how do we approach this?
So that's a good question. And I'm happy I get opportunity to be the last person to talk. I mean, you benefit from the discussion. So thank you, guys. The simple answer to this question, it looks loaded, but it's not. The Leviathan exists. The Leviathan is still powerful. The Leviathan still has all the powers, and our constitution that we drafted actually followed that principle. It gave a lot of powers, enormous ones, to the president or the leader of the country. So the Leviathan is still functional. The Leviathan still exists. It just happened that for this particular case, and in most cases, the Leviathan is part of the situation. The Leviathan is a participant and the Leviathan is corrupt. And that is why Galamsey is becoming like a wicked problem, but it's not. It's really not a wicked problem. We've made it a wicked problem because we have political participants who are engaged in the very activity. So for me, I don't really draw a distinction between legal mining and illegal mining in this particular case. It is the method of mining. We have people with all the licensing doing the things in a way they shouldn't. And the only way they can get away with it is the fact that we have politicians and we have the leaders as active participants with interest. Let me give you a little bit of history of myself growing up in Konongo and a little bit history of Galamsey, how we used to do it. Before I was born, the people from Konongo Odoom were doing Galamsey. When I was born and I was growing up, people were doing Galamsey. And at that time, the Leviathan was not an active participant. So you realize that it was done differently. So the people would go to the mining sites. And these were people who naturally were looking for economic activities and they were not getting. They would go to existing mining sites, maybe mine in the existing mining area, then gather one or few stones, put it at the back of their neck or head. They have a place which is marshy area, which is like a pond where the water there don't really link to the main source of drinking water, the Owureku. And these people had common sense growing up in the 90s in Konongo. They would carry the stones, go to these areas and wash their stones and get one or two blade. They call it one or two blade of gold and go and trade it and get some money and spend it. That was the nature of Galamsey. That's why we call it gather them and sell. If you go to Obuasi, it was the same. They were going to the Anglo Gold or the Obuasi Goldfield site, dig in there illegally, the cover of darkness, do their own things. And at times, if you look at the literature, most of these pollution were being done by surface miners who had all the legal registrations to mine, but they were polluting our environment. It was not really Galamsey. Galamsey people were really not violating or polluting that much. The problem became a huge one when you had the Leviathan, the political leaders, participating in something which used to be some local people gathering stones here and there and making some few dollars or some few money. That is where it became an issue. Before the Leviathan got involved, you had ordinary people knowing very well that you cannot, out of common sense, you cannot wash the stones close to the river bodies. So that's what I'm saying. The source of drinking water in Pra, Owerri, and all these places were still intact when Galamsey was going on in the 90s. Nothing happened to it. It just recently when during, I think, when we entered into the 2000s, no, even after Kufuor, then became a huge issue where you had.
So how do you break that relationship, right? Because the one expected to address the problem is deeply involved in it. So from a governor's perspective, how do you break this unity, essentially, so to speak?
Again, when impunity takes over a country, and when people realize that they can do things and get away with it, it's difficult for me to sit here and say how you're going to break that cycle. Because the Leviathan that we have vested our powers in, the government we vested our powers in, are directly involved in that activity. So we can only hope that they, and in this case, it's not really MPP and this. I like how Manesseh put it, that if you want to do really a proper analysis and you have to put it in a proper perspective. We have an oligarchy, NDC and MPP forming an oligarchy in terms of our governance system since 1992. And we have all of them being actively involved in Galamsey. And I can tell you one thing, when the next government comes into office, let's assume John Mahama is to win, and he's likely to win, Galamsey will stop temporarily. But it's not going to stop because they are solving the issue. It's going to change hands. because there are some people that need to work. They are not getting the Galamsey site because they are not NDC. They are NDC folks. So it's going to change hands. So basically, they can solve it. It's not really a big problem. They can solve it, because if they can solve it in such a way of changing the hands. In Konongo, when MPP came, Galamsey moved from some group of people who call themselves the Big Seven to another group of people. Because in most places we have the MC, the district chief executive, who is the head of security, being the Galamsey Ken. And when the security gurus are coming to do their raids, he alerts, in most cases, his workers, and they all leave the area. So that is what is happening. So the only way is, I don't know, but that is how our country has really descended into. And it's reflecting in all sectors of our economy, sports, agriculture, everywhere. And that is why now we don't even have a proper pitch to play soccer on. We have to go somewhere to play. That is the level of the governance we have now. The solution, I don't want to sit here and pontificate solution. I just hope that whoever comes into office in the next 4 or 5 months will understand that in life, at times, there are a lot of ways you can find money. It's not, you don't need to destroy your own existence, your own environment to make money. Even when our people are trying to be corrupt, they cannot even apply common sense to the corruption. Even when they want to be corrupt. Because if you really want to be corrupt, there are a lot of ways you can make money rather than threatening your own existence. And that is what is happening to our country. Our people don't have common sense in virtually everything that they do. Other than that, who should even come and tell you that washing mercury close to a water body that is a source of drinking water for your people is bad? You don't even need a law. In most cases, common sense can solve this. That's what I'm telling you, that before the government got involved, our people were using common sense in Konongo. They were never polluting the Owureku, which was the source of drinking water for us. Until I left that place, Owureku was clean. Now, if you go and Owureku is gone, basically, it's gone. People are mining in their own homes. They have fence wall. Joy FM did documentary on that in Konongo. People mining their own homes. They have fenced their homes. They are mining, and their relatives will be sinking. This pregnant woman was there, went to the toilet and sank. That is the reality of our God. So this is purely common sense. This is a reflection of the functional state failing. Our conventional state is still there, but our functional state has failed. And basically, that is the main issue that we are confronted with.
All right. Okay. So, but let me bring Manesseh in here to unpack this problem for us, because you've been down there. You've encountered politicians. You know how, to some extent, deeply involved they are. How do you think this is going to end? You know, because you narrate a situation where powerful people are deeply involved. The president actually absolved one of his party members, who is the chairman of the MPP in Ashanti region, of any blame when it emerged that his company was mining in a forest. So, I mean, is it a situation of despair that cannot be resolved?
Well, this question is like the question people ask me. So, Manesseh, do you have hope for this country? And 10 or so years ago, I would have preached a whole sermon on hopefulness and why we shouldn't give up and all of that. But that hope seems to be failing because of what we have witnessed as a people in the past 8 years. Some of us were so confident that Akufo-Addo would be different. He would at least set a tone for a certain recovery of what we had lost. Little did we know that he was going to take it to very obscene levels. The major thing has to do with leadership. I have said and I want to repeat it, that those people down there, and as Owureku said, we had this problem happening, but on a very small scale. Those who tell us that the only way to survive is to do illegal mining, I don't agree, because those who sponsor these heavy equipment are not very hungry people who cannot afford their next meals. Many of them are in Accra. And when we are not prepared to fight a problem, we give all manner of excuses. One, about the foreigners, and they will do this and they will do that, as if we are so helpless as a people that we sat down for slavery to happen. Colonialism happened, and we always blame someone else instead of our own contribution. I think 2021, when I was at the fourth estate, we did a right to information request to the Ghana prisons. And we got information on the number of foreigners in our prisons. And there was only one Chinese in our prisons. Only one Chinese. Even that, we were not sure what offense took him to prison. And within the period, hundreds of Ghanaians and Nigerians, Ivorians, and Burkinabes had been imprisoned in Ghana for illegal mining. And in one of the court rulings, the judge actually said the foreigners should be deported after they served their term. So in 2024, we are in our own country, in Africa, imprisoning Africans, imprisoning blacks, but the Chinese, we say, get up, oh, we beg them to leave. And then in 3050, our grandchildren will be reading books that said, oh, Ghana used to be a good forest country, and then we had the Chinese who came and then destroyed our forest cover in search of gold and all of that. And I tell people that when we are talking about slavery, I blame the whites for about 30 to 40%, and I blame the blacks who went all the way to Kulungungu, Paga, Salga, Picoro, and all those places, got our fellow blacks and came and sold them. And today, when the story is told, we only hear the side of the wicked white man and not the wicked black man. It is the same problem we are encountering. Two, it is not so much about the lack of common sense, because I don't think that Ghanaians, we have sand or pure water or Galamsey water in our skulls. We have brains. If for nothing at all, those of us here know the problem. And there are some who are perhaps more learned than us. If we wanted to resolve this problem, it is not a problem with of the lack of capacity or the lack of knowledge for which you are perishing. It is just plain greed and the unwillingness of those we claim to be leaders to resolve the problem. First, the people we even put in there. Sir John, as we all know, at least some of us know how Sir John became Sir John, as the General Secretary of the NPP. And I think it was his time that the NPP started falling from a very intellectual and sane political party to the booga kind of thing we now have today. Sir John is a lawyer, so I don't have anything about his competence as a lawyer. But if you want people to go to Forestry Commission, if you want people to go to the MPA, if you want people to go to Energy Commission, if you want people to go to the EPA, sometimes you'd ask, what is their background? If you take a politician to Forestry Commission, and the Forestry Commission didn't even have a deputy CEO, now I'm told they have 3 deputy CEOs, and all of these people are politicians who have constituents they want to serve. at the end of the day, it isn't about their competence or what they are coming to do. It's just about how to advance their politics and all of that. And then when Sir John died, I was the one who broke the story about his will. And we know how much resources he had, including resources that belong to the state in terms of land, including his sending forest guards to protect one of the companies mining in forest areas. This company had been given a license to go into this, how do you call it, the forest. And then the Forestry Commission sent guards to protect this company. It was only after Sir John died that we saw the company as part of his business interest. So I'm just trying to say that we are not serious about solving our problem. Once we get a leader who is prepared to solve the problem and to put his presidency on the line, not just by word of mouth, because our President Akufo-Addo, we have come to know that he talks and he doesn't seem to mean it. He says we should be spectators and not, citizens and not spectators. And even though we realized later that day that the statement was plagiarized, at least his pronouncements in the past made some of us believe in him. But today, I said somewhere that sometimes when I hear those promises, I tend to take the promises a man makes at the very peak of his sexual ecstasy more seriously than them. What I'm referring to is a leader who says what he or she means and thinks that, okay, we are at a place that we cannot continue to be. It is not sustainable in this country we call Ghana to do the things we are doing. We are likely to crash at some point if we don't solve our problems. This excuse that they don't have something to eat. I'm having this interview at the Nebraska State, and then last week we went to a farm about an hour's drive from Lincoln where I go to school. And then when you are even landing on a flight in the plane and you look out, you realize that the state of Nebraska doesn't have some of the forest cover or very good lands that we have in Ghana. It's like a desert and all of that. But this is the breadbasket of the United States. They grow corn. The farm we went, they said, oh, this is just a small family farm. But it was bigger than some of the biggest farms in Ghana. We don't even have to go far to somewhere else. Today, if Burkina Faso closes its borders with Ghana, we are going to struggle with meat. We are going to struggle with tomatoes. We are going to struggle with onions from Mali and the Sahel. And I've been to Burkina Faso, both on land and also using an aircraft. And I know that Burkina Faso, they are more miserable than us in terms of the vegetation. So why is that they are able to feed us with vegetables and others, and then we cannot have tomatoes? So those who claim that they cannot find jobs are actually destroying cocoa farms, are destroying farmlands. And we are so blessed that some of these places, if you clear and just throw the seeds and birds don't eat them up, you can come back a few months later to harvest. So we don't really have any excuse for the things we are doing. The only problem is that leadership. Yes, I know that people are also involved and all of that, but I use this example when I first traveled out of Ghana on my first trip outside Ghana. I went to South Africa, and then a car rental company came to pick me up. And the driver at a point slowed down on a certain road. And when I asked, there was no traffic. He said, there are cameras, speed cameras here. If I go beyond the stipulated speed limit, I'll be given a ticket. And because I work for a car rental company, I can lose my job because of this. So I realized that the difference between this driver And some of the lunatics that ply the Accra Cape Coast is just the laws and their enforcement. These people are not so exceptional. Sometimes we sit in classrooms with some of people from some of these developed countries, and you don't see them as so exceptional that I don't even know how to put it. You don't come across as being so daft, or the Ghanaians or Africans in other countries in Europe, in America, and all of those places. When we go there, we excel. So why is that? When we come home, the very basic problems that confront us, we don't resolve them. It is leadership, and the leadership is failing because of greed, and the greed is sustained because we don't have value systems. It is about how much money you have. So some people say, oh, let the soldiers come and all of that. But if you know what happens within some of the barracks, somebody said that some time passed, it was more lucrative to be deployed as a soldier to fight Galamsey than to go on a UN peacekeeping mission.
Wow.
Yes. And that tells a lot.
Yeah.
So as a people, it is about leadership. Once we get a leader who is committed, and this leader says that my district chief executives, if I hear of Galamsey in your district, you will lose your job and you'll be prosecuted. The district chief executive, who is the commander or chairman or chairperson of the district security council, would want to be serious about it. The chiefs, we have seen some chiefs who together with their youth, have been able to stop Galamsey. There are leadership failures at all levels, but it must start from the top, because so much power is at the top, and when we get that right, I think it would trickle down to the various departments of national life. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So, Francis, well, Manesseh just pointed to a fact, right? That the police, there was Operation Vanguard, where the government sent police and military personnel to Galamsey areas to address the illegality. There's evidence that some of them were bribed, and they too have become compromised. So whenever you bring up this issue of banning Galamsey, people cite that as evidence that there's no way you can ban Galamsey and be successful. Last week, I watched a bit of news file, and Samson Ayeneni had some experts on his show. And at the end of the show, he asked each of them, should a state of emergency be issued or declared to literally ban Galamsey for the time being? And most of them, almost all of them said no. And they cited the practicality of enforcement, and maybe the loss of livelihoods. So what do you think should be the approach here? These guys cited very grim pictures. There was a guy who even said, for instance, it would take 300 years for the soil to regain its health. Yet this is the same person that said that he doesn't think that there should be a total ban on Galamsey. But also being an expert in the area, what do you think is the most practical solution in the time being? And of course, balancing the pros and cons.
Yeah, so using the military or Operation Vanguard is a radical top-down bureaucratic process of dealing with the issue, and that won't work. So what we need to do is to, first of all, seek and prioritize the voices and input of the miners themselves, Galamsey miners. So we need to have a broad stakeholder consultation where Galamsey miners, chiefs, district chief executives, opinion leaders, all the leadership at the community level and at the national level are brought to the table to have a discussion on how to go about it. If there is going to be a ban, the ban should be a temporary one. Temporary ban, and then have the broad stakeholder consultation on how to deal with the issue. And then we can now formalize the process. People will register with the Minerals Commission. People who are interested in mining will register with the Minerals Commission.
Okay, so for instance, if there were to be a ban, how long should that ban be? Like, what's the minimum number of years that you think it should take for perhaps some recovery, and then new licenses be issued out to, the people that qualify?
I think I wouldn't give a specific number of years, but what we need to do is to have a temporary ban, try to sanitize the system, try to clean up the rivers and water bodies. And we can clean up our rivers, water bodies, and the environment at the local level. We need to localize the cleaning up so that each, like Manesseh, I like Manesseh's point on, using the district chief executives. If a district chief executive fails to do their work, then they will be given the sack. We need to use that approach, and also through the chiefs. Chiefs are very revered in our society. So if we use the chiefs, the district chief executives at the community level to deal with each community's problems, I think that will be a way of solving the problem. And once we do that, once we sanitize the system and clean our rivers to some extent, then we can formalize the sector and give concessions, specific concessions. We can even use the geological survey department to do a mapping of the geological system, or to do a geological survey of all the minerals in Ghana, and then we can now allocate some concessions to miners who are interested in registering a small-scale mining business. So that is the way to go about it. But if we use the top-down approach without involving Galamsey miners to be part of the conversation, I mean, we won't be making any progress.
Okay. Well, yeah, like it counts me among the people who think that there must be a top-down approach to this, because my position is that we've reached the point of limits. Basically, there's no longer room for any talk shops and people to take per diems. We've had that for a very long time, right? I think, we have enough information at this point.
And that is because that top-down approach we've often used usually do not include the miners themselves. We only invite a few government officials and government regulators, chiefs, a few people to to have the discussion. We don't involve the miners themselves. We need to involve the miners in the conversation, because it is a livelihood issue. Galamsey is largely a poverty-driven activity. Of course, I believe that some of them are in it because they want to get rich quick, like Owureku said, the politicians, government officials are now part of the process. That's why we're having all these issues. But largely, it's a poverty-driven activity. And so if you want to deal with the issue, we need to ensure that miners are part of the conversation, and then we can, be assured that we'll be dealing with the problem. If not, no, it will never end.
Okay. Yeah, but people always say, with respect to, Galamsey is a bipartisan issue, and we should take the politics out of it. But I think politics is integral to it. The leadership that Manesseh mentioned here, or everyone else mentioned, has to take the political process for that to happen. Now, and I'm going to play a video here of the president. And this tune is very different, if not the opposite of what we heard him in the earlier video. And then I'll come to Ike, and then we'll talk about the politics of this. He's talking about
he can't change his mouth. One side of his mouth is saying one thing, the other side of his mouth is saying another thing. It is not good for him. In the 2020 election, after the government had acted on the Galamsey, he went around all the mining districts of Ghana to tell them that when he comes, he's going to give amnesty to anybody who has been attacked on the Galamsey issue by my government. So it's not surprising that MPP lost in all those constituencies. That when he comes, he will now enforce the Galamsey laws. We want the NDC, four-time NDC presidential candidate, to come clean to tell us where does he stand. This is what I meant when I said that I was prepared to put my presidency on the line. I was prepared to take the political risk in dealing with them, Galamsey.
Okay. So, I mean, did he really take the political risk here? You know, and then he's referring to John Mahama here, right? Saying that he needs to take a clear position with respect to Galamsey going forward. But again, it goes back to this question of how to address this, because the politicians are deeply involved. And now he's playing politics with it, talking about his opponent, you know, coming with his hands clean about where he stands. So, Ike, how do we situate the politics in the midst of this problem? Because most of the guys on Newsfile, in fact, who said that they didn't think a ban was practical, cited political reasons. They said we are in a campaign season where there's an election impending, and so really taking a radical position like that is not going to be politically feasible. So yeah.
And of course we see this even, I don't know how many of you have done this, but like a cursory look at the campaign manifesto or policies of the MPP NDC in regards to Galamsey. If you look at their document, you see there's a very scanty reference to this big issue, right? That tells you something. So, but you know, I agree with Owureku's earlier point about the role of common sense and how things have changed. And I agree with Manesseh's view earlier about the greediness in all of this. But I think there is a bigger picture here, which is a lot of things have changed within small scale mining. And Mark, you cornered me a little bit because you wanted me to focus on China, but I think I'm going to have to talk on China.
Yeah. With the China question, it seemed like
so. Here is the thing. You see, there are so when I was started paying attention to this issue of small scale mining, the field was not as saturated as it is now, which is to say that the actors that are involved in small scale mining is completely different from what used to be. The technology, the financing, the machines, equipment that is used in small scale mining has completely changed over the years. So a lot of things has happened over the years. We need one of the first solutions to this whole big issue of small scale mining and illegal mining is we need to have a more situated understanding of the political economy of Galamsey. You see, and I say this because when you have this task force, so go back 2012, task force by Mahama, Kufuor comes in, Operation Vanguard, Operation Halt, right? And then new task force. All of these things are approaches that are not dealing or doesn't show a deeper understanding of what's happening, which is why I agree with Francis that the issue at stake here is very multifaceted. Number one, the original idea of illegal mining that we know, or small-scale mining, illegal mining that we know, used to be that it was largely poverty-driven. These were people that have been sacked from big mining corporations whose land have been leased out on concessions, and so it was a survival issue. What we see now is that it goes beyond just ordinary people in mining communities doing small-scale mining. What we have now is politicians engaged in mining and big powers, not just politicians, right? So the actors that are involved has changed. The other dimension of the actors is that, of course, we can talk about non-Ghanaians like China. What Chinese miners have done to our small-scale mining is to radically revolutionize it in terms of the technology that is used. It used to be pickaxe, shovel, and pans, like what Owureku was referring to. They introduced the chemfan, they introduced the excavator, they introduced the drilling machine and all of that, right? So that has changed. So Galamsey is no longer the 90s or early 2000 Galamsey that we used to know. The other thing that has also changed largely is that, of course, financing, those who are behind it. What I'm trying to say is that there are different aspects of it. There are people who are engaged in small scale mining that are poverty driven, that are in there for survival. There are those who are in it as a result of greed. These are people in big places, including chiefs, including some of the MCs that we mentioned that should be a solution. Some of them are complicit. So there's a whole layer of that, right? And that was not the case before. So I feel like we first need to acknowledge the complex political economy of Galamsey. It's changed, and then the solution has to be from that angle.
Okay.
Francis made a point earlier about enforcement, right, of laws. That is a critical part of this, because what we have at our hands is, and Mark, to go back to your point earlier about helplessness, I think it's not an issue of helplessness. It's more of the fact that we have been overtaken by our negligence, our lack of commitment and irresponsibility in terms of dealing with this issue, right? So a ban may be a start. But if you have political parties that are going to form government that don't have comprehensive policy on this existential issue of small-scale mining, then I would agree with Manesseh that the hope that you can have is dwindling. And this is why I place a lot of emphasis in my work on the role of the Ghanaians. Look, in all of this, every time that this Galamsey issue have come up is because civil society group and ordinary Ghanaians have brought it to the fore. And I think we need to pay attention to that. The Ghanaian is very active, very very observant of what's happening. The Ghanaians are paying attention on social media and elsewhere. Every time it is the ordinary Ghanaian people, whether they have been affected by the mining issues or what, they bring it to the table. And then before the state begins to pay attention, right? And then when they try to pay attention, they are using means, military and police forces to deal with this. That is not how this thing can be solved. You need stakeholders. And that's why, I mean, I was asked recently, I was speaking out in DC, well, not so recently, a couple of years ago, and the question came up about China. Look, there is nothing you can do about the arrival of Chinese into Ghana. They're going to come.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What you need, how do they get it? Some of them come with tourist visa and they end up engaging in mining. How is that possible? Right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there has to be a continuous pressure from the Ghanaian people, and they are doing that. And I'm happy that even though Galamsey is not a big issue in the manifestos of the big parties, it has to be a topical issue in these elections, right? And subsequent discussions. We need to have all the stakeholders involved. You are not going to find a solution to illegal mining when you sit in Accra and bring some few people and chiefs and people together and think that you are devising a solution.
Mm-hmm.
People, even if you place a ban, don't forget Kuku did a ban for about 8 months. There was a moratorium, right? How did that go? Even when the ban was ongoing, people were still doing the mining. So it tells you something, right? That there is a lot of impunity out there, but also all these layers. It's not just target the poor people who are engaged in illegal mining. It's not just to target the elite that are sponsoring it, not the Chinese that are providing the technology and all of that. It's a multi-layered issue. And I feel like the way we have approached it shows that we don't understand it. You need to really understand how this thing works. So anyway.
Okay, all right. So, but I'll go to Owureku with a question of local government, right? I mean, and again, I don't think we necessarily have a local government system, right? I mean, if you look at a country like America, they normally say that America began from the ground up, right? Local governments formed first, and then the state came in place on top of local government. So there are certain things that American localities would take responsibility for and address them without needing the overreaching hand of the state, right? But in our case, I mean, maybe we can almost liken that to the case of the chiefs. But then again, they are complicit in this in some way. What do you think is the role of localities in really, because they are the ones that are feeling it immediately. The guy sitting in Accra, maybe in the long run will feel it, but in terms of the immediate dangers of Galamsey, it's those who live in those communities?
That is a very good question, but Mark, if we are to really look at the issue, you will not put a lot of emphasis on localities, because in Ghana, when it comes to mining, everything is vested in the central government. I mean, the ability to mine the land, once there's gold under the land, that resources is vested in the hands of the government and in the central government. And we don't also have a functional decentralized local administration that you can even rely on. So that to me is not my issue. And all this conversation too, I don't want to put a lot of emphasis on chiefs. We have limited their powers in our constitution. They only have moral kind of suasion in terms of moral appeal. So the chiefs can engage in corruption if they want to, but if we have a very good functional state system, we should be able to use the functional state system to overcome the corrupt nature of those chiefs. It's just happened that we have a dysfunctional governance system. We have our land tenure system invested in chiefs, the chiefs or the families, and also we have the government or the state involved in the administration of the land. So one sells the land and one has to administer the land. It creates a lot of confusion in terms of how we use land. But my issue is more with the fact of corruption, the fact of dysfunctional states. And, at times we want the law to work. At times we think that banning it will solve it. But when you have a country that virtually everybody is corrupt, and I'm sorry to say that the only person who is not corrupt is the person who doesn't have the means to be corrupt. It is really hard to think that a ban will solve it. Right now, you ban it, the person who is supposed to go and implement the ban is looking at ways and means to cut corners to help the other person to come in. And that is why, like you said, I think you or Manesseh, somebody said that, a military person said that is very lucrative to go to mining site and provide protection than to go on a peacekeeping tour, maybe in Lebanon. Why is this so? Because the person is going to the mining site to protect or to ensure that the land is protected. But that person we've trusted him to do that, goes there and engage in corruption. There was a police guy who told me that Obuasi is the best place to be a policeman. And I asked him why. And he said, Obuasi, and that was in the early 2000s, it's way back. He said, Obuasi, you have a lot of cases of mining where the person who come and make the complaint doesn't have the license to buy gold. And the person that we go and arrest who doesn't have the license to sell gold. So at times we take money from this person, take money from the other, and ask all of them to leave. So when you have such an environment, banning can work maybe temporarily, I don't know, but we've banned it over and over before and never worked, because you have series of corrupt activities in between the chain of control and the chain of command. So I am of the view that at times we talk about leadership. I agree, leadership is very important and critical. But when leaders in every facet of our society, let's say the time we develop our country, those leaders had to voluntarily submit themselves to the rules and regulations that they themselves established. Either than that, it doesn't work. And we've never had that. We've never had a situation where the people who established the 1992 Constitution or 1957 submitted themselves to the rules. Once we don't have leaders submitting themselves to the rules and the rules arresting them or the rules constraining them, you will see all of us also taking advantage of the rules and becomes impunity. So that is really what is happening. We can talk about all the policies, the programs, the banning, and all those things. The method of Galamsey is the issue. And that method can be cured with good rules and laws. Simple. It's not like we don't have those rules. We have it. We know that when you mine close to the river bodies, we don't like it. We know it. But we are not doing that because we are corrupt, basically.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
That's
all right. Yeah. Okay.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah. All right. So what I get from this discussion is that we need to get lucky one day to have a leader who be willing to enforce the law, right? Subject himself to the Leviathan himself. Because, I mean, we've had a long conversation, and it doesn't seem like there is a particular solution that we can point to. And I was, I want to bring down the curtains here. But if anybody has any other thing to add, or perhaps you want to respond to something someone said, I mean, you can have the floor now. But I think we've covered most of the issues here, and I don't know if, yeah. All right. Well, so gentlemen, thanks for coming. I was accused today somewhere of empaneling only men, and I take that seriously, and hopefully.
And I think I know where this is coming from. This I know your accuser.
Okay.
Are you offline now?
No, I'm not offline.
No,
We're not offline.
I think,
I mean, you can be offline and we can have casual conversation.
No, we're not offline. We are still on.
Yeah.
So next time I'll do. Yes.
I mean, I was going to say that one of the things that like people like Manesseh is doing is like I was saying earlier is putting the pressure on, right?
Yeah.
Like you are saying that maybe we should just hope for. I mean, we'll be lucky to have a leader who would sort of lead to these changes. But I don't think we'll be lucky. I think it has to do with participation from Ghanaians.
Okay.
Like where our democracy is largely as a result of. I'm sorry.
Are we online or offline?
No, we are on. We are on. So if you have anything to say,
sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
But let's cut it and let's have a casual conversation, man.
No. Let's keep it for a little bit. Yeah, let me hear.
I guess my view is that we don't have to wait to be lucky.
Okay.
I think we have to really encourage those who speak out on these issues, right? Like that's what I'm saying. I will make reference to Manesseh's work and this particular book, for example. But because that's where, if you look at our political trajectory, our democratic history, it is largely because of the people who are pushing for accountability.
Okay.
And that's a hallmark that I think we need to keep on, because look at what has happened recently with this, with the Galamsey, right? Like the recent discussion and all the noise about it is because young people on the from their homes on social media are bringing it, and the leaders cannot afford to sit idle. They will be forced to do something about it. And of course, when the young people who are putting pressure on the leaders, they become leaders too, there's going to be another set of people who will continue to put the pressure. And that's the hope I have. Really, that's what I want to say.
I kind of disagree in the sense that we don't want to build a governance system where we are always basic things. We have to put pressure. People have to like the whole Galamsey thing is so basic. It shouldn't be like polluting water bodies. If they were not destroying water bodies and destroying the environment, we wouldn't have cared whether the money was going to Chinese or was going to the guy in Konongo or the rest. It would have been a different conversation as to how we're going to make money out of our resources. It would have been a different conversation. This conversation is because they're just destroying our water bodies. And if really we need a lot of activities and action, we need the Manessehs to go underground and do all those things before we will solve basic things by people from polluting our water.
Well, I get a frustration, but let me also agree a bit with Dr. Odoom in a sense that there is nowhere in the world that you find angels leading. Those of us on this platform speaking like angels, if we found ourselves in leadership, we may try to do the best we can, but there are certain things that we may do that may not be in the interest of the people. So we always would need someone to let us know or remind us, even if we forget genuinely, that we gave you this power to do ABC. And I think the problem with our society is that we tend to think that the politicians, they have the power. In 2016, Akufo-Addo was an ordinary man. NDC people were having a march around the Nieman side and they were pelting his house with stones. He didn't have the power to stop it. The Nieman police station is just opposite Akufo-Addo's Nieman residence where he lived at the time. December comes, he becomes the president, the president and the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces. There were people who had shops and buildings in front of that. They were all cleared. Why? Because this man suddenly became the president. Why couldn't he do it previously? Because he was an ordinary man. The only difference is that some of us went and then thumbprinted for him to become the president. And then he became president because of us. If Ghanaians say that John Mahama should not become president, he will continue to remain the John Mahama, talking and nobody listening to him. If on December 7, we go and vote for him, we give him so much power. The power belongs to us. When organized labor said they wanted the hotels building to stop, sales of the hotels, the Senate hotels to stop, the government tried to do, but when they stood up, within that weekend, Elizabeth Ohine and others issued a statement. They said, no, this statement you have to sign before I accept it. They had to issue another one, have it signed. For once, we knew who the power belonged to. But here we are. Sometimes the people you fight for attack you. I come from Northern Ghana, and I've had a lot of people who are called me and say, why is it that you are using your journalism to attack Northerners? And when I say, okay, cite the example, RLG was doing this, you attacked him, Abu Gapela was doing this, John Mahama, and they are talking about SADA and other things. What they don't know is that those projects were supposed to help them. Their own people are using them to make money. And then when you attack the incompetence or the corruption in the sector that affects them, they come at you. So I think that everywhere in the world, if you allow your leaders the freedom to do whatever they like, the best of them can easily degenerate into something else. The bigger problem now is, okay, how are we able to do it when they've managed to let us think, if I'm this ethnic group, I have to vote for this. If I'm that ethnic group, I have to vote for that. So you have the two biggest ethnic groups in Ghana. When I was writing the fourth John, I actually did my research using the population census at the time. And the biggest ethnic group was for MPP. The second biggest was for NDC. The third was the Fantis. And perhaps that's why sometimes when central region or maybe they sway, things go. But we have ceded our power to those who beg us for that power. And until we come back and say, look, we are not going to allow this, they'll continue to mess us up. So it is very difficult, but I also believe that if the individuals do something, we should be able to, we cannot get everything resolved.
Let me say this and I'm done.
Okay.
Sorry,
all right. So yeah, and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah.
When I'm talking about, I'm not talking about elections or events, but we need to develop, and that is why I don't have a lot of faith, because the functional administration of every country, the goal is that that function should at times, in most cases, be automatic when you work the institutions for a long time. So we don't need, like, this whole water pollution, it's somebody's job. If the person has the powers and the person has been empowered to work within the confines of the institution that we've created, the person can go and stop these people. But if we are going to always expect people to put pressure for basic things to be done, people cannot put pressure on virtually everything, basically. So I get it when you say there are no angels anywhere. That's true. But in some places too, basic things are not even up for conversation. We move past that. There are these things that we know that it is wrong. We move past that. Then other things that are emerging, that are evolving, that we need citizens' participation and citizens, whatever. But here we are in our country, we are still struggling with the basic things. Polluting the water bodies. I think even the people, the Galamsey people working and destroying the water bodies, cutting down the cocoa trees, they know it's wrong.
Yeah.
They know. It's not like they don't know. So for me, that's where we have to develop our institutions too. And when we have failed to develop that functional, responsive institutions, and that is what we have failed from 1957 to now, we haven't had it. That is why we are struggling with basic things in our governance system, whether it comes to maintaining even bridges when we make it, maintaining it. It's somebody's job. When somebody's building, we have a structural engineer in the district. It is his job to go and look at it. Those are things we've set in place. We have people there. Nobody is doing the job. Nobody is enforcing it. Nobody is ensuring that somebody is doing it. So basically, that is my take. Sorry to interrupt you.
All right. Okay. So, I think, most of the time, the initial, if you like, the founding fathers are the ones that are always supposed to make the sacrifice. And in our case, perhaps that didn't happen. So we need somebody to break the fever. Probably we need a leadership that would be willing to put their own interests at stake and put in place the right institutional arrangements. Because it's now become evident, basically confirming what Aristotle once said, that if citizens were angels, there won't be a need for government. So the institutional arrangements have to be such that we assume it's the devil himself that is coming to lead us. But someone has to make the initial sacrifice to be the angel to put that arrangement in place. And I think that's basically what we are struggling with in Ghana. But gentlemen,